Hi folks, how you all doing? It's James here. Sorry if I'm a bit lopsided. I've got my iPad balanced on a set of cushions, and I've got a feeling I'm on a slant. But you know, we live in an imperfect world, so let's just go with it. So, hope you're all doing well. I've got some interesting things to show you. Actually, I've got three or four. I think it's 3, 4. I don't know. I can't count. A few. Really quite extraordinary charity shop finds from Bernardo's here in Lancaster. Things that you wouldn't expect to find, you know. I've got a feeling that there's more down there as well. I'm trying to resist going down there because I've got a horrible feeling I will just end up spending too much money. But I went down there the other day and I found these things which, you know, they're not the kind of things that you normally find in charity shops. This is the Millstone Brothers, and this is from 1989. It's their album Slinky. And this bunch were around, it was 89, when I first came here to Lancaster to uni. That they were the first band that I remember being advertised as a kind of live band that you could go and see. I think they were playing at the Sugar House in Lancaster, which is the main kind of night spot here, you know. And they were tipped for success, they were tipped for great things. I didn't go along to see that gig. It was in my first term. It was before I was confident enough to say, you know, catch a bus into town or buy a ticket to go and see a gig, so I didn't see them. But I do remember reading about them in the press at the time. And I suppose this lot, I don't know if they mistimed it or something. They came onto the scene in the late 80s and they had that sound, that kind of slightly, well, that sort of indie, post-Cure kind of sound. But they also had that quite sort of boomy, post U2 kind of sound as well, you know, a bit kind of, there was that thing in the late 80s, those bands like the Waterboys, they had this kind of big boomy stadium rock sound. You had this generation of bands that came up at the back end of British indie, and they sounded like they wanted to get in on the U2 kind of stadium rock action, you know, so they started to beef up their sound with, you know, big cavernous drum sounds and big guitar sounds, edge like guitar work. But at the same time, this bunch, they had that sound to them, with bands like the Inspiral Carpets and the Charlatans, that kind of slightly shuffly, bongo-y, you know, they've got the kind of psych, Inspiral Carpet type keyboard in there as well, and a singer with this very kind of reedy voice. You know, you'd know it instantly if you heard it, just that kind of sound that was around in British rock right at the end of the 80s. You know, the Stone Roses have already been, and you know, you've got the Happy Mondays. I don't think this bunch were ever going to make it really big. I just think they were coming in at the end of something, and I don't think their sound ultimately was going to survive, you know, because Blur was just around the next corner, Oasis was just around the next corner. It was a different vibe, a different thing altogether, the Britpop thing. So the Millstone Brothers were never going to make it. They are actually still around. They've been, you know, making albums and you know, playing gigs for years and years, but now they're, you know, they're quite small fry now, I think. They're from Colne in Lancashire originally. It's, you know, it's a nice enough album. I got it for a couple of quid, and like I said, it's not the sort of thing that you would normally find. They had loads of 12 inches of theirs as well down there, but I don't tend to buy 12 inches really, because I don't have enough shelf space for them, so I left those behind for some other collector. Okay, right, this next one, again, not the kind of thing you would expect to find in a charity shop. This is Radio Stars, and this is their second album, Holiday, or the Radio Stars Holiday album, a fantastic cover. And they look like a friendly bunch of guys, don't they? Very, very interesting history with this bunch. When Sparks became big in the 1970s, you had Ron and Russell Mayle were the songwriters in Sparks, and they came over to England really because they couldn't get a hit in the States. And England really embraced them. They became big stars in England, and they had a band of British musicians. And but quite soon, I think Ron and Russell wanted to get rid of them because they wanted to assert themselves as being the creative main guys in Sparks really, and they didn't want to get tied down. So let me just get the name right. A couple of the guys who had been used in Sparks formed a band of their own, and this was them, Radio Stars. Actually, one guy, Martin Gordon from Sparks, plus the vocalist Andy Ellison, who had been in the band John's Children, which was the band that Mark Bolan had been in prior to T-Rex or Tyrannosaurus Rex. So radio stars, they had their roots in glam rock, but they were coming up just at that time when the new wave thing was breaking, the punk thing was breaking, and they basically pinned their sail to that mast, and they did music that was much more in a kind of new wave punk kind of idiom. You know, they toured and supported with various bands from that era. I know they were on a bill with Squeeze at one point, and maybe a couple of other, you know, quite big bands of that late 1970s new wave movement. But there's a bit of glam in their sound, definitely. There's something about the crunch of the guitars and just the way that the grooves unfold, you know, which, to my ears, you can hear they've got roots in glam. It's a really good fun album. It's just, you know, humorous lyrics, just good solid rock production. Like I said, a bit of a new wave sound to them. Nice cover of Norwegian Wood by the Beatles, and you know, you can see from the song title there's a bit of humour. No Russians in Russia. I've got demoed Sex in Chains Blues Again, Mama, Part 1. Sounds like a bit of a glam song. Great fun. Like I said, not really the kind of thing you'd expect to find in a charity shop. So I was chuffed. Again, this one you wouldn't expect to find it in a charity shop, but I found it on that same day. This is the confusingly named 4th album by the Violent Femmes. Now, the Violent Femmes, I got into them in the 90s. A friend of mine got me into them. He was really into kind of all the cool bands of the day, you know. And I started listening to them. I had their first album in my collection years ago, and it went missing from my collection, totally vanished. It's quite a rare, hard to find album. Steve Carlson was kind enough to send me a replacement. I've never seen any of their other records in the wild before. This was their 4th album, released in 1989, after a short, I think they had a bit of a sabbatical. They'd done the first 3 albums, they split for a while, they came back and made this record. And this was, I think this was a return to a more stripped down sound. I think they'd gone off into various different directions, you know, musically, and they came back as a 3-piece and did this record, which is, it's got a classic alt, you know, US indie kind of sound, very stripped back, a little bit skiffly in places. It's got a kind of almost a sort of cowpunk kind of sound to it. It's quite hard to describe. The main guy, the singer, I think it's Gordon Jano or Gordon Gano. His voice, it reminds me of so many different vocalists. There's a bit of Matt Johnson from the. There's a healthy dose of Lou Reed in there, definitely. It's very sort of attitudey. It's got a bit of a swagger to it, and a slightly kind of ramshackle sound. You know, not a million miles away, maybe from Tom Waits. Very, very quirky lyrics, very funny subject matter. You know, song titles like Fat, Nothing Worth Living For, that kind of teenage angst thing. But it's sort of, it's done with a cocked eyebrow. You know, there's a bit of irony there, and it's really great because occasionally they'll just go into this full-blown, balls to the wall kind of rock 3-piece, you know, rock and roll thing, very rattly and just very crash bang wallop. You know, great stuff. Really, really good. Like I said, I would be surprised to find this record even in a record fair, let alone in a box of crap in Bernardo's. So yeah, very, very chuffed to find that. Very chuffed indeed. Lovely jubbly. So I think I'll leave it there. Like I said, I don't want this to be too long, so I'll do another video very shortly and I'll show you some other stuff. I've got some VCLT that I need to show from Headley and from Graham Watson as well, so I'll do that in a separate video. So I'll get this one edited and uploaded and then get cracking on the next one. Okay folks, take care, see you soon, bye.